Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. My name is Ruben Dario Chavez Jr., aka Ray Chavo, and this is the first video that I will be making following and talking about my favorite team in the world, Real Madrid. I've been a fan pretty much my whole life because my dad's been a fan his whole life, and obviously watch all the games, have a lot of opinions, and I wanted to share them, break them down, and give my takes on what's happening. So the overall goal and plan of the channel is I'm going to try to make videos before the game, little previews, things that I think might be important, if there's any injuries, reactions after the games, and then if any major news happens, if there's an injury, if there's transfer news, if there's some kind of controversy involving one of the players or the managers or the board, anything that's noteworthy and that may affect Real Madrid, I'm going to try to have an opinion. No, I'm not going to try to have an opinion about it. I will have an opinion about it, and I will bring it here and discuss it and hopefully create a forum where other like-minded people or not like-minded people can either agree, disagree, or have a conversation with me. So right now it's the international break, and I wanted to just kind of give my take on the first 4 games of the season, what I think's been good, what I think's been bad, some of the things that I think people are overreacting about, and just in general, I thought it was a good time to pick it up, and then, you know, next week, once the games start back up, we'll really kick into gear and start talking again about results and stuff that's happening. So to say that it's been a mixed bag to start is being generous. Obviously, a draw against Las Palmas and a draw against Mallorca kind of rang the alarm bells. Even in their win against Real Valladolid, it wasn't perfect. That first goal did open the game up, and then they looked like they were clicking a lot more after. But it's been up and down, and I do think that because of the fan base that we have and because of how demanding we are as fans, you know, we expect Real Madrid to win every game, and not just win every game, but win it very comfortably, especially if it's against opposition that we see is lower. And then you have Barcelona winning all 4 of their games, and it puts pressure. But we have to remember it's the first 4 games of the season. The seasons are long. Injuries will happen. Things will change. And just because we're not on the top of the table right now doesn't mean we won't end up at the top of the table. And just because we're on the top of the table, if we were at the top of the table right now, just because Barcelona's at the top of the table, doesn't mean that you're going to end up winning the league either. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So that being said, I do find it concerning how quickly, and again, I can only speak for the space that I see on Twitter and in the WhatsApp group, because I am part of the Toronto Peña, and if you're in Toronto and you are a fan of Real Madrid, I suggest trying to reach out. They have a Facebook group, there's a WhatsApp group, and they watch all their games at the Furcanon Bay. Well, they screen them all there, and people try to come out as much as they can. For the big games, obviously it's a lot more full, but they're an official recognized Peña by Real Madrid. That just happened recently, so join up, meet people who also love the team that you love. But to get on to the point, a lot of people started turning on Ancelotti very quickly, and people were saying that he doesn't really understand the best way to get out of this team, criticizing his subs, that's a narrative that's carried on from last year. There were some games where people felt players could have been rotated a little quicker, some games that maybe could have featured more of a certain player and not so much of the other. And I think the big flashpoint recently has been inaugural. People think he's deserved more run, and especially at the expense of Rodrigo, someone who the fans may love, but it seems the rope is getting shorter and shorter, and I'll talk about him in a second. I think a lot of that is overblown. We know Ancelotti doesn't have this system that he's married to, but think about what he's having to deal with. There's an injury to Camavinga, who, if he was healthy, would be in the starting 11. Jude also just recently got an injury, and I'm not saying that they looked perfect when Jude was there, but still, you take him out for the last 2 games, that's massive. And then we lost Toni Kroos, and it's like that's a one-of-one player, a generational type talent. So you have to learn how to adapt with him, without him, and then you add Kylian Mbappe, who I still do believe is one of the best players in the world. Like, I was just equally as hurt and upset when he did not come originally, and when he spurned Real Madrid to re-sign that contract with PSG. I was upset as well. It's natural. You're a fan of this team. You want them to get the players, and it felt like we were used as a negotiation tactic. That doesn't mean that he lost his talent. And just because he's had a bit of a bumpy start doesn't mean that he's lost it either. in a perfect world, we would have gotten a different player. And I do still believe that. As much as I'm all in for cheering for Kylian Mbappe, and I want him to succeed now, and he's a Real Madrid player, and, we'll talk about how he's fared so far. It would have been nice to have more of a number 9. But that's not the world we live in. So we have 3 people who principally play on the left or want to play on the left trying to fit into this team. And there's going to be some growing pains. There's a lot of freedom. There's not a lot of, you have to do this, you have to do that. So I think Ancelotti is seeing through those growing pains. He didn't get a full preseason, which I think is another thing that I want people to remember when you take into account the slow start. Most of the Real Madrid starting 11 was playing for their national teams in the Euros, the Copa America, for the entire summer, and they only joined up very late. And the ones that joined up earlier, Luka Modric has so much tread on his tire, only has so much tread on his tires left. So you take all this into consideration, and I think you got to give him a bit of a break, that it's not just gelled and looked perfect right out the box. Moving forward on that point, I have a friend of mine named Jake who asked me and another mutual friend of ours, Peter, some predictions for our favorite teams, who we thought would be important, who we thought not, and who would have maybe the worst season. And I picked Rodrigo, and I want to talk about him because I do think he kind of embodies a lot of this knee-jerk reaction that I'm seeing. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Rodrigo's a perfect player. I'm also not going to pretend like there haven't been deficiencies in his game, and that sometimes he could finish a little better or make a decision a better decision, or more sharper decision, or a quicker decision. But how quickly do we forget how integral he was as a sub off the bench against Manchester City? How quickly we forget how good he can be with the ball at his feet, and how much he can open up those spaces. He's been sacrificing more than anybody. He sacrificed the left to Vinicius when Vinicius became, in my opinion, the best left winger in the world. He's sacrificing even further because he's not playing the central role that they were kind of trying to gear him towards at times last year. And he's playing on the right, out of position, and he's still learning, and he's still young. And I think sometimes we forget that, how young these players really are. But I said that he might have a tough season because every mistake is going to be magnified. There was one play that sticks out in my mind so clearly where he could have just passed it off into the middle to Mbappe, but he didn't. He took a shot, and it was kind of wasteful. Didn't really have a good angle. And when I think more and more, I'm like, yeah, those are the plays that are going to be ultra magnified for him specifically because of Adra Güler. And I'm not saying that Adra Güler is not great. He was phenomenal in the Euros, and I think he's going to be a phenomenal player. But for the people that are clamoring for Adra Güler to come on and replace Rodrigo, he's played a little more. He's featured as a sub quite prominently already pretty early, and he does add something. But I look across to the rivals, Barcelona, and I think you don't want to put too much on a young player's shoulders too quick. It can burn them out, and we don't need to burn him out right now. Rodrigo deserves a chance to continue at that spot. And when he is clicking, and when he is really firing on all cylinders, and when he's found some bit of a comfort, and even in the last game, he did a much better job sticking to the right, which, again, Ancelotti did say he took a lot of the blame for the early struggles, and the team was lacking balance. I'm sure that he directed Rodrigo stay to the right, hug that side a little more, just to give them an option and a profile on that side. I just think we should cool the brakes on, okay, well, we have to bring Adra Güler. Because, take the other example. A lot of people were clamoring for Ceballos. People were saying, well, Ceballos could offer a different profile. Maybe he could start in the middle and cause something to happen. Now he's hurt, but even before he got hurt, he didn't offer much. He didn't offer anything different. So there's this implicit idea that's like, okay, well, we put this person to start. Obviously, they're going to do well and solve everything because the profile, it's not quite that simple. If Ceballos was that good of a player, he would not still be on the bench for Real Madrid. He would not. And that's just as simple as it gets. He's basically a depth piece if everything goes horribly wrong. And he will play in smaller matches, and he will help us when he comes back from injury, I hope. But he's not going to be anything but a peripheral figure in this squad, I think, moving forward. Tchouaméni has had up and down moments too, talking about the midfield. But in the last game, I thought he looked a lot better. He looked a lot more comfortable. again, these are all growing pains. He played for France. He's still young. It's a very tough position to learn, and he's basically trying to take over for Casemiro still, who is one of the best that the world's ever seen in that position, in my opinion. So I think he is progressing, and he's looking more assured. And once Camavinga comes back, he will probably go back to the bench. But the more that we have that option to slot him in there, if we want to go more defensive, or if we want to rest Camavinga, and I do think he's looking more himself and growing back into the player that we know he can be. I don't have a lot of complaints about the defense. Maybe that's controversial to some people, but Mendy has been phenomenal. I said it to anybody who would listen to me this past summer and the end of last year, where there was talks about Alphonso Davies. I like Alphonso Davies. I think he's a very exciting player. Him on the wing with Vinicius would be very dangerous, very attacking. But Mendy has that defensive quality that I really like. And while Fran Garcia is not Alphonso Davies, I'm not pretending that he is. It is an option off the bench to give some of that attacking flair at times that Ancelotti has used, and it works. It doesn't work perfectly all the time, and there is a limit to how much you can use it, but do we really need Alphonso Davies over Mendy with how solid Mendy has been and how crucial he's been in preventing goals at times? I don't really think so. It would be surplus to requirements, unless one of them is comfortable being a bench player, but I don't think either one of them will be. So that's just my opinion on that large scale. But I've been very impressed with Mendy. Red card notwithstanding. Rudiger's doing Rudiger things, still looking very tough, very menacing. The defensiveness has been a little exposed, and that's just because people not tracking back, and that's, again, something that Ancelotti's going to have to figure out and work on everybody with. But I thought the defense has been great. Militao as well. We were worried, I think, as a fan base with how last year ended, and he still didn't look himself. He's looking more and more himself every day. He's looking strong, solid, stable. Are there some mistakes? Of course there are some mistakes. It's again, he's had a long recovery. He had a long summer, and he's still playing his way into shape a little bit, I believe, and to fine-tune. But he's looking like the kind of player that we thought he was as well. Danny Carvajal still bringing his class. Ageless wonder, Danny Carvajal. And Lucas Vazquez is a different profile there. Has been Lucas Vazquez. He will do good things, and he will do some head-scratching things, but largely good. Jude, it's unfair to really take too much from the sample size. It did look like, again, we're going to have to refigure out how to integrate him when he comes back, but I'm sure that these talented, intelligent footballers will figure it out, and he has looked great. Whenever he's on the ball, his little turns, the way that he seems to glide through the pitch, and he always seems to find the space. Fede Valverde, for me, has been the most important and best player of the season. The assist that he gave to Kylian Mbappe to score his goal was phenomenal. It was one of the most beautiful goals I've ever seen. One of the most beautiful passes I've ever seen. And he has a really hard job stepping into Kroos's number and his boots, so to speak. And he's not Kroos. And if there's one thing that I wish is that Madrid more and more realizes, okay, we don't have Toni Kroos. We're not going to get those same passes. So there has to be a different way of attacking the low block and switching the play and making these quicker decisions, because we don't have this locksmith at the back anymore. But despite all that, Valverde has been the most consistent player and the best player by a mile. And someone who screams Real Madrid captain one day just by the way he works and works and works both offensively and defensively, and how much he brings to the squad in terms of energy and determination. I can't say too much. There's no words to really describe how important he's been and how important I think he will continue to be in this season for Real Madrid. So I dyed my hair like him. So I'm all in on the Fede Valverde train. Obviously, I think the players that people want to talk about the most, Vinicius and Kylian Mbappe. I'm always surprised by the fan base and how quick they are to turn on Vinicius whenever there's a result or he looks a little upset or whatever. And could he sometimes prevent players from getting under his skin as quickly? Obviously. We would all love everybody to keep their cool. But he's a fiery, passionate player who plays with a lot of flair, plays with a lot of style. And I think it comes with the territory. I don't want Vinny to tone down any part of himself that would prevent him from being the most him he can be, if that makes sense. And you've seen just how brilliant he's been down that left wing. Sometimes the touches and the skills that he unlocks, and he can really take on anybody one-on-one, and he's been opening so many chances. And that's where we get to the last part of this haul. Kylian Mbappe. He finally scored his 2 goals against Real Betis. I think that'll be huge. I think it'll change everything moving forward. I think it's going to be a huge weight off his shoulders. The fact that he had missed a chance earlier and Vinicius encouraged the Bernabeu to clap for him and support him, and then when he scored, he implored the home fans to cheer louder, and then he gave him the penalty. Mbappe is the type of person that wants that pressure, that wants to exceed those markers that we lay down for him, and he lays down for himself. So I do think this is the beginning of an avalanche, so to speak. And again, when you look game by game, there were some times where they were forcing the issue, I think, to Mbappe a little too much. It was clear that everybody wanted him to score, and everybody thought that they needed to kind of get him more involved. And there is also the side where I think Mbappe is being a little too cautious and a little like, I don't want to upset the status quo. He's not demanding the ball at times, and he's not being kind of the superstar that we would expect. But I think the more he gets comfortable and the more he understands how to approach those sorts of conversations and those sorts of discussions with his teammates, especially out in the field of play, we'll see more of his personality and more of that dominant superstar come out. Brahim Diaz has been great off the bench, and I know people are calling for him to maybe start. Again, I love Brahim Diaz, but think about it like this. When he came to Real Madrid, I don't think anybody was expecting much, given what had happened at AC Milan and just his general profile throughout the years. We were expecting maybe an impact bench piece, and now you want to make him the starting right winger. Why? He does so great off the bench. When people are a bit tired, the game gets a bit more chaotic. He has the flair and the substance and the athleticism to make something happen. Is it a bit unfair to him? Could he probably start for a lot of other teams? Yeah, absolutely. But do I think that he is the type of person that I would want to have nailed on starting 11 week in, week out? I don't know about that. I really don't. So I love him. I want him to continue to play off the bench. I want him to continue to do that. But as a starter, I don't see it. And then Endrick. Endrick is another player that I wanted to talk about. Oh, phenomenal. Again, but an example of you could probably give him more minutes. Absolutely. The first goal that he scored, where he took a little touch, had a little bit of, he barely had an angle for the goal. Barely. But he drove it in, took his chance, and finished beautifully. And even in the last game when he went in, it looked like he was going to score right away off his first touch. So he's an electric, amazing player with a lot of potential. And I want to see him in a Real Madrid shirt for years and years to come. And I'm sure that I will if he continues progressing at this rate. I do not believe that we need to put too much on his shoulders too quickly and risk hurting his development or risk the fan base turning on him too early. Because, we've seen this with Luka Jovic, with other players. If they hit a bit of a struggle, it's hard to kind of find your way out of it. So ultimately, I think less is more right now. Patience. Let him get used to training with the first team. Let him get used to some of the physicality in these short bursts where it's a bit safe. And his time will come, and he'll get more game time. There's a lot of competitions this year. So of that, I'm not really worried about. I'm trying to think of any other player that I want to focus on, any other trends. I will say, in the last game, because people have been talking about the balance a lot, in the last game, the attack was a little more balanced. Again, still predominantly the left side. It was 41% on the left, 27% on the middle, 33% on the right. And I think that's probably as balanced as it'll get more often than not. And I think that's fine. There were moments in the Atalanta game and in the Valladolid game and small moments in all the other games when you really saw the front line connecting and passing and those intricacies of understanding the space that people want. Those will come with time. And they're working on it and they'll continue to work on it. But I just think it's crazy to believe that this season is somehow lost, like I've seen some people say, or that we're somehow catastrophically behind. I don't think it's quite that dire yet. What I do think is it's been a slow start for sure. But we haven't lost, and the players only seem to be getting more and more comfortable with each other and more comfortable playing with one another, and that's only going to grow. These episodes are not designed to be too long, so I'm going to wrap it up shortly. I just wanted to say thank you guys for watching or listening, if it's just something you put on in the background to hear my lovely voice. The plan is to continue to put these out, and if anything major happens before the game that's happening on the 14th, I will obviously make a video and talk about it. Until then, I'm Ruben Dario Chavez Jr. I have a podcast actually with a good friend of mine, Cheyenne Karimi. It's mostly geared towards the Premier League, but we do talk a bit of Real Madrid and Barcelona because we're both Real Madrid fans. It's called Touchline Banter. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, all this stuff. I'll link my socials and the socials to that podcast in the comments of this video. And yeah, if you agree, if you disagree, if you have anything that you think that I should talk about, or any different opinion that you think is worth discussing, always leave a comment and let me know. And yeah, I'm excited to go on this journey with you. And hasta el final, vamos Real.